Ignoring a quiet warning can change a life forever, but sometimes listening for only 10 seconds can change destiny instead. The evening skyline of Seoul shimmered beneath countless lights as luxury sedans lined the entrance of one of the city's most prestigious hotels, where politicians, executives, and international guests gathered beneath polished marble columns for an exclusive charity gala. Security personnel moved with practiced precision, scanning every arrival while photographers captured elegant smiles that would appear across tomorrow's headlines. Among the distinguished guests stood Nathan Carter, the respected Korean Mafia boss whose calm authority seemed to silence every room he entered. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit with a crisp white shirt and dark silk tie, Nathan acknowledged greetings with quiet confidence before making his way toward the waiting motorcade. Years of discipline had transformed caution into instinct, and every movement followed a schedule designed to the exact second. Across the street, hidden beneath the warm glow of decorative lanterns and surrounded by fresh lilies, white roses, peonies, and eucalyptus, a small flower stand remained open despite the late hour. Behind the wooden counter stood Maya Brooks, a young blind flower girl whose gentle smile welcomed every passerby, whether they purchased flowers or simply paused to breathe in the fragrance. Although darkness had hidden the world from her eyes since childhood, she experienced the city through sounds, shifting winds, subtle vibrations beneath the pavement, and rhythms that most people hurried past without ever noticing. She carefully tied a white ribbon around a bouquet while listening to the orchestra of footsteps echoing through the intersection. Delivery trucks rumbled in the distance. A bicycle bell rang twice before disappearing around the corner. Hotel doors opened and closed in measured intervals as guests arrived one after another. Every familiar sound blended into the neighborhood's evening melody until one quiet detail suddenly disturbed its balance. Maya slowly lifted her head. Her smile disappeared. Somewhere beyond the ordinary conversations and passing traffic, a silence settled where natural movement should have existed. She listened again. The breeze carried the scent of polished stone and fresh rain, yet the rhythm of several footsteps remained strangely identical, almost rehearsed instead of spontaneous. Nathan had already reached the rear door of his waiting sedan when Maya unexpectedly stepped forward, carefully holding the bouquet against her chest. One nearby security officer instinctively moved between them before Nathan calmly raised a hand, signaling everyone to remain still. Maya never looked directly at him, yet her face turned naturally toward his voice. "Please," she said softly, her words steady despite the busy street surrounding them. "Do not leave yet. Wait exactly 10 seconds." Confused glances passed among the security team. One officer quietly checked his communication device, while another scanned rooftops and nearby windows. Nothing appeared unusual. Nathan studied the young woman with thoughtful curiosity. She showed no panic, no desperation, and no attempt to attract attention. Instead, she stood peacefully, as though asking someone to admire the evening sky rather than interrupt carefully planned security procedures. Nathan looked briefly at his watch. 10 seconds meant almost nothing to a man who spent every day making decisions worth millions of dollars. Yet something about Maya's calm certainty convinced him to pause. 5 seconds passed, then 7, then 9. Before the 10th second disappeared, one member of Nathan's security detail received an urgent update through his earpiece. His composed expression immediately changed. "Sir," he said quietly, "our advance team has discovered unexpected activity near the original departure route. They recommend delaying movement while they complete another inspection." Nathan slowly lowered his wrist and looked back toward the flower stand. Maya had already returned to arranging flowers, her gentle fingers moving carefully among fresh white lilies as though nothing remarkable had happened, while the city continued breathing around her in a rhythm only she seemed able to truly hear. The unexpected delay lasted only a few minutes, yet it quietly altered the direction of Nathan Carter's entire life. His security team completed another inspection of the original departure route and returned with a carefully worded report. They had discovered clear signs that someone had recently occupied an elevated observation point overlooking the street before leaving moments earlier. No confrontation had taken place, and no one could determine the individual's purpose with certainty, but the discovery was significant enough to justify changing the route. Nathan listened without interrupting, then looked across the street where the flower stand remained softly illuminated beneath rows of hanging lanterns. Maya Brooks calmly trimmed the stems of fresh white lilies as though nothing unusual had happened. Curious guests occasionally stopped to purchase flowers before returning to the gala, completely unaware that a simple request to wait 10 seconds had quietly changed the evening. Instead of entering his vehicle immediately, Nathan crossed the street alone, signaling his security team to remain several steps behind. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, but respected the instruction. As Nathan approached, Maya smiled before he spoke. "You came back," she said gently. Nathan stopped beside the flower stand. "How did you know it was me?" Maya tilted her head slightly, listening with effortless concentration. "Your footsteps are measured. Most people hurry when they wear expensive shoes. You never do." Nathan glanced briefly toward the polished leather beneath his feet before smiling with genuine curiosity. "You asked me to wait exactly 10 seconds. Why?" Maya carefully wrapped another bouquet with white ribbon before answering. "Because the street stopped sounding like itself." Nathan remained silent, encouraging her to continue. "Every place has a rhythm," Maya explained softly. "The buses arrive with familiar echoes. Delivery drivers greet one another. Cafe doors open and close at certain moments. Even the wind moves differently between buildings. Tonight, one small part of that rhythm disappeared. Several footsteps sounded patient instead of natural, and the silence around them felt heavier than it should have." Nathan looked toward the busy avenue. He heard engines, conversations, distant music, and the steady pulse of city life, but nothing seemed unusual. Maya gently smiled. "Most people listen for loud sounds. I listen for missing ones." Those words settled quietly in Nathan's thoughts. During years of building influence and protecting those closest to him, he had invested heavily in advanced technology, experienced advisors, and highly trained security professionals. Yet none of them had described danger the way this young blind flower seller had. One of Nathan's senior officers stepped closer and spoke respectfully. "Sir, we should continue." Nathan nodded, but did not leave immediately. "May I ask your name?" Maya turned naturally toward his voice. "Maya Brooks." "I am Nathan." She smiled softly. "I already knew." Nathan raised an eyebrow with amused surprise. "From my footsteps?" Maya laughed quietly. "No. The people around you become silent when you arrive. They respect you before you even speak." Nathan found himself laughing as well, something his security team rarely witnessed outside private moments. Before leaving, he purchased the bouquet Maya had just finished wrapping. "Who are these flowers for?" she asked kindly. Nathan looked down at the white lilies in his hands. After a thoughtful pause, he answered honestly, "I do not know yet." Maya nodded as though the answer made perfect sense. Sometimes flowers simply remind people to slow down. Nathan thanked her and returned toward his waiting vehicle. As the sedan quietly disappeared into the evening traffic, Maya remained standing beside her flowers with peaceful composure. She listened to the familiar sounds of the city once again settling into balance, unaware that somewhere inside the departing vehicle, one of the most cautious men in Seoul had begun questioning whether the greatest protection he had ever received had come not from power or technology, but from a woman who understood the invisible music of the world around her. Ignoring the questions that echoed through his own organization, Nathan Carter chose not to dismiss the quiet encounter as coincidence. Instead, he instructed his closest advisor to learn everything possible about Maya Brooks without disturbing her daily life or revealing that she was being observed. Over the following week, the reports that reached Nathan contained nothing resembling mystery or hidden influence. Maya lived alone in a modest apartment above an aging bakery only 4 blocks from the flower market. Every morning before sunrise, she carefully walked the same familiar streets with a folding cane in one hand and a basket of fresh flowers in the other. She greeted the bakery owner by recognizing the gentle scrape of flour sacks across the floor before the front door even opened. She thanked the newspaper vendor before he spoke because she recognized the faint whistle he always hummed while arranging magazines. She knew which children were approaching by the rhythm of their laughter and which elderly neighbors needed help simply by hearing how slowly they climbed the stairs. There was no secret network protecting her, no extraordinary technology, and no hidden connection to Nathan's world. There was only patience, discipline, and years spent transforming limitation into remarkable awareness. Nathan quietly visited the market again several afternoons later, leaving his security team at a respectful distance so the ordinary atmosphere would remain unchanged. As he approached the familiar flower stand, Maya looked up with the same peaceful smile. "You are carrying less weight today," she said softly before he spoke a single word. Nathan paused with genuine surprise. "How could you possibly know that?" Maya reached toward a bouquet of pale blue hydrangeas, while speaking with calm certainty. "Your footsteps sound lighter than last time. People carry stress in the way they walk." Nathan smiled, realizing that once again she had noticed something invisible to almost everyone else. He admitted that several difficult meetings had finally ended, allowing him to breathe more easily than he had in weeks. Maya nodded as though she had expected the answer. She explained that every person carried an invisible signature composed of breathing, movement, pauses, and tiny habits most people ignored. Losing her sight had simply taught her to notice what others overlooked. As customers arrived one after another, Nathan quietly watched Maya serve each of them with effortless kindness. She remembered anniversaries by voice alone. She selected flowers based on emotion rather than appearance. One young father confessed that his daughter was nervous about her first piano recital, and Maya immediately chose bright sunflowers because she believed they carried encouragement. An elderly woman searching for flowers to honor her late husband received white lilies tied with a blue ribbon because Maya remembered blue had always been his favorite color from conversations months earlier. No one left without smiling. Nathan realized she was not merely selling flowers. She was restoring hope in small pieces throughout the neighborhood every single day. Before leaving, Nathan purchased another bouquet. This time Maya handed him white roses mixed with eucalyptus, without asking why. "These are different," Nathan observed. Maya smiled warmly. "Last time you needed a reason to slow down. Today you need a reminder that peaceful things grow quietly." Nathan accepted the bouquet with unusual care. As he walked away, he noticed something he had never paid attention to before. The busy market was filled with sounds he had always considered ordinary, yet after meeting Maya, every conversation, every footstep, every rustling leaf seemed connected like notes in a melody. For the first time in many years, a man whose life had always depended on seeing everything clearly had begun learning that some of the most important truths could only be discovered by listening. Several days passed without incident, and the quiet routine that had unexpectedly connected two completely different lives slowly became something Nathan Carter looked forward to more than any formal meeting on his calendar. His advisors noticed subtle changes long before he admitted them to himself. Instead of rushing between appointments with mechanical precision, he occasionally asked his driver to take a slower route through the old market district. Instead of remaining inside heavily protected offices until sunset, he found reasons to walk a few extra blocks beneath the open sky. Officially, these were simple scheduling adjustments. In reality, they always led him toward the small flower stand where Maya Brooks welcomed each new day with patient optimism. One bright afternoon, the neighborhood prepared for its annual spring cultural festival. Families decorated storefronts with colorful ribbons while musicians tuned traditional instruments beneath rows of lanterns stretching across the narrow streets. Children laughed as they practiced dance routines in the town square, and local merchants arranged fresh produce, handmade crafts, and flowers into cheerful displays that transformed the ordinary market into something almost magical. Nathan had agreed to attend briefly as a gesture of goodwill towards several community organizations. Although his security team carefully evaluated every detail of the event, they found nothing unusual beyond the expected crowds. When Nathan arrived, people greeted him respectfully, while continuing to enjoy the celebration. The atmosphere felt lighter than any public appearance he had attended in years. Across the square, Maya was arranging bright tulips beside white roses when she suddenly became very still. She did not appear frightened. Instead, She quietly lifted her head as though listening for a distant melody almost hidden beneath the music and conversations surrounding her. The cheerful rhythm of the festival continued, yet something inside that rhythm had changed. A street violinist unexpectedly paused between songs half a second longer than before. The fluttering banners overhead shifted with the wind, but one nearby fabric display remained strangely motionless. Somewhere beyond the laughter, several footsteps moved with identical timing despite belonging to different people. Maya slowly placed the bouquet back onto the wooden table. Nathan noticed the change in her expression immediately and walked toward her before anyone else recognized that anything had happened. "What do you hear?" he asked quietly. Maya remained perfectly calm. "The square is no longer breathing together," she answered softly. "Someone is moving with the crowd instead of moving as part of it." Nathan trusted those words without hesitation. He did not ask for proof or explanation. Turning toward his security director, he simply smiled and suggested greeting several elderly shop owners on the opposite side of the market before continuing the scheduled tour. The change appeared completely natural to everyone watching. Families continued taking photographs. Children chased colorful balloons. Musicians began another lively performance. Only Nathan's closest security officers understood that their entire formation had just shifted. Minutes later, additional members of the advance team quietly informed the director that unfamiliar individuals had abandoned positions overlooking the original walking route shortly after Nathan unexpectedly changed direction. No confrontation occurred, and the festival continued peacefully, without alarming a single visitor. As the afternoon sunlight settled across the flower market, Nathan returned to Maya's stand carrying 2 cups of warm herbal tea purchased from a nearby vendor. He offered one to Maya, with quiet gratitude. She accepted it with a gentle smile. "Did the city sound better?" Nathan asked. Maya listened for a long moment before nodding peacefully. "Yes," she whispered. "It found its rhythm again." Nathan looked around at the joyful faces filling the square and realized that true strength was not measured by how many dangers a person could overcome, but by how many ordinary moments of peace they could quietly protect without anyone ever realizing they had been in danger at all. After the festival ended, Nathan Carter discovered that the moments he valued most were no longer found inside boardrooms or behind heavily guarded gates, but beside a simple wooden flower stand where conversations unfolded without hidden agendas. Every few days he returned to the market carrying no expectations beyond hearing Maya Brooks describe the world in ways he had never imagined. She never asked about his influence, his wealth, or the complicated responsibilities resting on his shoulders. Instead, she asked whether the morning air had felt colder than the day before, whether he had noticed the scent of pine drifting from the nearby hills after the rain, or whether the birds nesting above the old bakery had finally returned for spring. At first, Nathan struggled to answer such questions because they were details he had ignored throughout most of his adult life. Gradually, however, he found himself slowing his pace each morning, paying attention to sounds and scents that once disappeared beneath endless schedules. One quiet afternoon, he arrived carrying a small notebook. Maya smiled the moment she heard his familiar footsteps. "You have started listening," she said before he spoke. Nathan laughed softly. "I have also started forgetting things because there is suddenly too much to notice." He explained that he had begun writing down the observations she inspired, from the changing echoes beneath different bridges to the way rainfall sounded against stone compared with glass. Maya seemed genuinely delighted. "Most people believe the world becomes smaller without sight," she said gently. "For me it became larger, because I had to discover it one sound at a time." As customers continued visiting the flower stand, Nathan quietly helped wrap bouquets whenever business became busy. His expensive suit looked strangely out of place beside buckets filled with fresh tulips, daisies, and roses, yet neither of them seemed to notice the contrast anymore. An elderly customer smiled warmly while watching Nathan tie ribbons around bouquets with careful concentration. "You are improving," she teased. Nathan admitted that his first attempts had been far less elegant. Maya laughed, explaining that every ribbon reflected the patience of the person tying it. When the afternoon crowd finally faded, Nathan asked Maya whether she had ever wished to leave the market and build a different life somewhere else. She paused thoughtfully before answering. People think I stay because I cannot see the world beyond these streets. The truth is that I stay because I can hear hope growing here every day. A child buys one flower for a teacher. A husband surprises his wife after work. A granddaughter chooses lilies for her grandmother. I listen to kindness travel from one person to another. Why would I leave a place where that happens? Her words remained with Nathan long after he returned home. That evening, he quietly reviewed reports about the neighborhood surrounding the flower market. Many buildings needed repairs. Several longtime shop owners struggled with rising expenses, and younger families found it increasingly difficult to keep their small businesses open. Nathan closed the folder and stared through the large windows overlooking the city lights. For years, he had solved problems by exercising influence from a distance. This time, he wanted something different. He wanted the neighborhood to become stronger without anyone feeling indebted to him. The following morning, he instructed trusted associates to establish an anonymous community improvement fund supporting independent merchants, restoring aging storefronts, and preserving the character of the historic market. No plaques would carry his name. No speeches would announce the donations. The only condition was that every improvement should appear to come naturally through local cooperation. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the decisions being made beyond her flower stand, Maya arranged fresh, white roses beneath the gentle morning sunlight. She listened to familiar footsteps approaching from the far end of the street and smiled before anyone else noticed. The city had begun teaching one powerful man to hear its quietest truths, and in return, without seeking recognition, he had quietly decided to help the city sing a little more beautifully. The changes began so quietly that most people believed they were simply the result of good fortune. Fresh paint appeared on weathered storefronts one week, followed by repaired sidewalks the next. New benches replaced broken ones beneath the flowering trees, brighter streetlights illuminated the evening market, and small grants allowed struggling family businesses to replace worn equipment that had served them for decades. Nobody claimed credit. Local newspapers praised the neighborhood for its remarkable revival, calling it an inspiring example of community cooperation, while longtime residents smiled with cautious optimism as familiar streets slowly regained the warmth they remembered. From years earlier, Maya Brooks noticed every improvement without seeing a single one. She heard construction crews greeting shop owners with cheerful voices instead of frustrated complaints. She recognized the softer footsteps created by newly repaired pavement and the happier conversations of merchants who no longer worried about closing their doors forever. The neighborhood itself sounded healthier, and to Maya that mattered more than appearances. One morning, she welcomed Nathan Carter with a smile before he reached the flower stand. "The street feels younger today," she said as she carefully arranged white daisies beside pale pink roses. Nathan looked around the market, quietly pleased that the anonymous efforts were accomplishing exactly what he had hoped. "How can a street feel younger?" he asked with genuine curiosity. Maya lightly touched the wooden edge of the flower stand before answering. "Old places become tired when people stop believing in them. Now everyone walks with purpose again. Even the children run differently." Nathan listened carefully and realized she was right. Laughter echoed more frequently between the buildings. Delivery drivers exchanged jokes while unloading fresh produce. Cafe owners left their doors open because more customers filled the sidewalks throughout the day. Hope had developed its own unmistakable rhythm. As the afternoon continued, one of Nathan's trusted advisors approached quietly, careful not to disturb Maya's customers. After waiting respectfully, he informed Nathan that the unusual surveillance reports surrounding the market had almost completely disappeared since Nathan began changing his schedules and routines. Whoever had once tried to predict his movements could no longer anticipate where he would be. Nathan simply nodded. He had not altered his habits because of fear. He had changed because Maya had taught him that life should never become so predictable that it stopped allowing room for ordinary moments. After the advisor departed, Maya handed Nathan a small bouquet tied with a simple blue ribbon. "These are not for you," she said gently. Nathan smiled with amused confusion. "Then who are they for?"
Maya
tilted her head thoughtfully. "Someone you have already helped but have never met." Nathan looked at the flowers without speaking. Maya continued softly. Sometimes kindness travels farther than we ever do. You never know where it finally arrives. Her words settled deep within him because they reflected exactly what he had hoped the anonymous improvements would accomplish. He had chosen not to place his name on a single project, believing that gratitude should belong to the community itself rather than to one individual. As evening approached, Nathan walked slowly through the market carrying the bouquet. He passed a bookstore welcoming its first full crowd in months, a bakery filled with customers laughing over fresh bread, and a music shop where children gathered around a young violin student practicing confidently near the open doorway. None of those people recognized the quiet connection between their renewed optimism and the man walking among them. Nathan preferred it that way. When he finally reached the end of the street, he paused and looked back toward Maya's flower stand glowing beneath rows of warm lanterns. She remained surrounded by fresh flowers and familiar voices, gently reminding every customer that beauty could still bloom even after difficult seasons. Nathan understood that the greatest victories were often the ones nobody celebrated, because they quietly allowed countless ordinary lives to become brighter without ever demanding applause. As spring slowly gave way to early summer, the flower market no longer felt like a forgotten corner of the city. Every morning opened with cheerful conversations, the aroma of fresh coffee drifting from newly restored cafes, and the gentle laughter of children weaving between colorful stalls before school. Nathan Carter continued visiting without announcing his arrival, choosing ordinary moments over formal ceremonies. His expensive suit no longer attracted much attention because the merchants had quietly accepted him as another familiar face who appreciated fresh flowers and peaceful conversations. Maya Brooks greeted him the same way she greeted everyone else, never with admiration for his influence, but with sincere warmth that made every visitor feel equally important. One calm afternoon, while arranging pale white orchids beside delicate lavender, Maya paused and smiled before Nathan reached the stand. "You are carrying gratitude today," she said softly. Nathan laughed with genuine amusement. "Can people hear gratitude now?" Maya nodded gently. "It changes the way someone breathes." Nathan looked around the lively market before replying. "Perhaps you are right." He confessed that watching the neighborhood flourish had given him a satisfaction unlike any business achievement he had experienced. Every repaired storefront, every successful family business, and every joyful conversation reminded him that real influence was measured by lives quietly improved rather than attention publicly received. Maya carefully wrapped a bouquet while listening to nearby voices blending into a familiar harmony. "People think strength means being noticed," she said. "Sometimes the strongest person is the one who helps everyone else shine." Those words settled deeply inside Nathan because they reflected the path he had slowly chosen without fully realizing it. As the afternoon continued, a young boy approached the flower stand carrying only a few coins carefully folded inside his small hand. He shyly explained that it was his mother's birthday and he wanted to surprise her with something beautiful, but he was not certain he had enough money. Maya knelt beside him and gently counted the coins by touch before selecting a handful of bright yellow daisies tied with a simple white ribbon. "These are perfect," she told him with a smile. "Your mother will remember the love behind them long after the flowers fade." Nathan quietly watched the exchange. After the boy skipped happily away, Nathan noticed Maya had accepted less than half the bouquet's value. "You gave him more than he paid for," Nathan observed. Maya smiled peacefully. "He gave everything he had." Nathan remained silent for a long moment before discreetly purchasing every remaining bouquet on the stand that afternoon. Maya tilted her head with playful curiosity. "That is a great many flowers." Nathan smiled. "Then perhaps a great many people should receive them." Together they spent the next hour walking through the neighborhood, leaving bouquets for elderly residents living alone, nurses finishing long shifts at the nearby clinic, teachers preparing classrooms for summer programs, and small shop owners who had quietly supported the community through difficult years. None of the recipients knew who had arranged the gifts. They simply found unexpected flowers waiting outside their doors with handwritten notes wishing them peace and happiness. As the sun lowered behind the rooftops, The market glowed beneath golden light, and laughter echoed gently between restored buildings. Nathan and Maya returned to the now empty flower stand, carrying only the basket that had held the bouquets. "Do you hear the city?" Nathan asked quietly. Maya closed her eyes, listening with calm concentration, although she had never needed sight to understand the world around her. After several peaceful moments, she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Today it sounds thankful." Nathan looked across the neighborhood that had unknowingly transformed him as much as it had transformed itself. For the first time in many years, he understood that the quietest acts of kindness often created the loudest echoes inside the human heart, and those echoes could continue long after every spoken word had faded away. The first morning of the neighborhood's summer festival arrived with a gentle breeze carrying the fragrance of fresh flowers through every restored street. Colorful banners stretched between buildings that only months earlier had stood faded and forgotten, while musicians rehearsed cheerful melodies beneath newly planted trees whose leaves danced softly in the sunlight. Families filled the market before breakfast. Children chased bubbles drifting above the sidewalks, and local artists arranged handmade crafts beside flower displays overflowing with lilies, roses, peonies, and sunflowers. Nathan Carter walked through the lively streets without announcing himself, accompanied only by a respectful distance between him and his security team. For the first time in many years, he did not feel like a powerful figure visiting a community. He felt like someone returning to a place that had quietly become part of his own life. Across the square, Maya Brooks smiled as familiar voices greeted one another with genuine excitement. She listened to the joyful rhythm surrounding her and immediately noticed something remarkable. The city no longer sounded divided into hurried strangers. Conversations flowed naturally from one corner of the market to another. Merchants laughed together while arranging displays, and visitors lingered instead of rushing home. The harmony she had always hoped to hear had finally become real. Nathan approached the flower stand carrying 2 cups of warm tea, placing one gently beside Maya before speaking. "It feels different today," he said. Maya accepted the cup with a grateful smile. "It does not only feel different," she replied softly. "It sounds like people trust tomorrow again." Nathan looked around the bustling square, realizing that hope possessed a rhythm just as unmistakable as fear once had. Throughout the morning they walked together through the festival, stopping whenever neighbors greeted them. The owner of the bakery proudly introduced new apprentices learning the family business. The elderly bookseller happily explained that children now visited every afternoon after school because parents once again believed the neighborhood was worth exploring on foot. The young violin student Nathan had noticed weeks earlier performed confidently in the center of the plaza, earning warm applause from a growing crowd. Every familiar face represented another quiet victory that no newspaper headline could fully explain. As the afternoon sun settled above the rooftops, the festival organizers invited local residents to plant a small garden beside the central fountain as a symbol of the neighborhood's renewal. Without hesitation, Nathan removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and joined families kneeling in the fresh soil. Maya carefully touched each flower before handing it to waiting children, describing its fragrance and meaning with gentle patience. White lilies represented hope. Yellow daisies celebrated simple joy. Lavender reminded people to remain peaceful, even during difficult seasons. Watching them work side by side, no one saw a feared mafia boss or a blind flower girl. They simply saw 2 neighbors helping a community bloom. When the final flowers had been planted, a quiet breeze moved across the square, carrying the mixed fragrance of hundreds of blossoms through the warm afternoon air. Maya closed her eyes and smiled. "The garden already has its own song," she whispered. Nathan listened carefully. He could hear birds resting on nearby rooftops, children laughing beside the fountain, distant church bells echoing across the city, and countless conversations blending into one gentle chorus. For years he had believed peace was something protected by power. Standing beside Maya in the heart of the flourishing market, he finally understood that lasting peace was created one kind decision at a time, growing quietly through ordinary people until an entire neighborhood could breathe together again without fear, without hurry, and with the comforting certainty that tomorrow would welcome them with the same beautiful melody they heard today. Several months later, the neighborhood no longer remembered the streets as they once had been. Visitors arrived from across the city to admire the lively market. Local musicians filled the mornings with gentle melodies, and every season seemed to bring new flowers blooming beside restored walkways where neighbors greeted one another by name. The greatest transformation, however, could not be measured by renovated buildings or successful businesses. It lived quietly inside the people who now believed that kindness could still shape the future. Nathan Carter continued visiting the flower market whenever his responsibilities allowed, never announcing his arrival and never expecting special treatment. Maya Brooks always recognized him long before he reached the flower stand, smiling as his familiar footsteps blended naturally into the rhythm of the neighborhood. Their conversations remained wonderfully ordinary. Sometimes they spoke about the changing weather. Sometimes they discussed the fragrance of newly opened flowers or the songs of birds returning after the rain. Neither of them ever mentioned the evening that had first brought them together, because neither believed that extraordinary moments needed constant retelling. They simply allowed gratitude to become part of everyday life. One peaceful morning near the beginning of autumn, Nathan arrived carrying a single white flower instead of purchasing an entire bouquet. Maya smiled softly. "You chose only one today," she observed. Nathan nodded. "Because one is enough." He gently placed the flower into her hands. "Months ago you reminded me to slow down. Since then I have discovered more beauty in ordinary mornings than I found during years spent chasing important destinations." Maya carefully touched the delicate petals before smiling with quiet understanding. "Flowers never hurry," she replied. "They bloom when they are ready." Nathan looked across the market where children laughed beside the fountain they had helped decorate during the summer festival. Elderly couples enjoyed coffee beneath shaded trees, and young shop owners welcomed visitors with confident smiles. Everything around him reflected patient growth rather than sudden change. His closest advisor approached respectfully from a distance and quietly informed him that every remaining security concern surrounding the neighborhood had long since disappeared. The reports had become routine, peaceful, and wonderfully uneventful. Nathan simply thanked him and asked that the usual visits continue because protecting peaceful places remained worthwhile even when no one noticed. The advisor smiled, recognizing how profoundly his employer had changed. After he departed, Maya listened to the gentle breeze moving through the leaves overhead. "The city sounds happy today," she whispered. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment and listened beside her. He could hear church bells ringing far away, bicycles passing along the freshly repaired streets, merchants opening their shops, birds greeting the morning, and countless conversations rising together like one harmonious chorus. For the first time, he did not hear separate sounds competing for attention. He heard a community living without fear. As the morning sunlight settled across the flower market, Nathan quietly reached for another bouquet, paying exactly the same price as every other customer before wishing Maya a peaceful day. She thanked him with the same sincere kindness she offered everyone who visited her stand. There were no grand speeches, no public celebrations, and no dramatic revelations waiting at the end of their story. There was only a neighborhood restored through quiet compassion, a powerful man who had learned that listening required greater strength than commanding, and a blind flower girl whose extraordinary heart had taught him to notice the invisible beauty surrounding every ordinary day. They walked away in different directions beneath the warm autumn light, each carrying something the other had freely given without expecting anything in return. The flowers would eventually fade, the seasons would continue changing, and new faces would fill the market in the years ahead, but the quiet lesson planted there would remain long after every blossom had fallen, reminding everyone fortunate enough to hear it that dignity grows through humility, hope spreads through kindness, and the world becomes brighter whenever one person chooses to truly listen to another.